Welcome back to Undefendable. I'm doing a little bit of something unique here. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to pan out, but ultimately I want to try and help you understand a pick three, ban one setting in a competitive environment. Maybe you have locals, maybe you have things where you want to start practicing for things like that. And I think there's a lot of confusion, maybe not confusion, but how can I be the most optimal when it comes to bringing three heroes and not completely getting countered, right? So I'm hoping this is helpful. This is just again my hot take, but we're gonna hop in and you guys can kind of provide some feedback if you guys would like to. So first things first, any top if you're gonna do a pick three, ban one. I always recommend at least bringing one of these S tier heroes simply because if you want to play the other two, or if you know they're going to ban one, it kind of helps you pick the other two. Now, one thing you'll notice with these S tier heroes is they're going to be pretty flexible in these spots. However, if I were to slot these into here, I'd go here. I'd put Cursed Pirate in the top defense, although she does have undefendable, and she's probably more of an adaptable, but a top defender. Paladin's going to be a top defender, but also could fall into undefendable. Ultimately, these are all very adaptable heroes, as you can notice. But if you bring Shadow Thief, it's likely going to be banned every time. So just be aware if you bring these S tier, if you're not bringing more than one, it will likely be banned. If you wanted to bring more than one, I kind of am breaking this down based on, you know, styles, right? And if I'm thinking of how the game currently works, you have top defense, right? The top defensive heroes, right? So Shadow Thief is a top defensive hero with his ability to go into the shadows, evade, poison, etc. Cursed Pirate is a top defensive hero. Paladin's a top defensive hero. So these are going to be like your top defensive heroes, right? When it comes to hyper aggro, I would say Iceman and Spider Man are likely going to be your most hyper aggro, and probably Pyromancer. And then I would say Black Widow is going to be pretty adaptable. She has a slightly slower start, but she also gets around things with agility and then builds up the board and does those things, right? So if you know you're going to be facing a lot of these things, if I know that I'm going to be facing a lot of top defense, I need to find heroes that can avoid swinging into their defense or getting around it, right? So that's where, I kind of start to flesh this out with, right? We have Ninja, we have Jean Grey. Who else do we have? We have, who else is undefendable? These are really two great picks up here for that slot. I would even put Black Panther kind of in a top defense. He has a terrible defense. Let me just be clear. But if you're facing heroes that can like chip you away and do things like that, and he can burst, he's going to be really adaptable in that, right? If Spider-Man's hitting you twice plus webbed, you're getting three kinetic energies. If Iceman's hitting you twice, although Black Panther still loses that, you're getting two kinetic energies. If Pyromancer puts burn on you, you're getting kinetic energy. If Jean Grey puts burn on you, if Ninja is poisoning you, if Shadow Thief is poisoning you, etc. Black Panther is going to be kind of nice in this meta because he can gain the kinetic energies a lot quicker into some of these matchups, right? But this is kind of how I would play this out: is I would try and find a top defensive hero. If I'm not just going to bring S tier stuff, I would try and find a top defensive hero, a hero that can avoid swinging into top defenses. So if I know they're good with X and they're going to pick a top defensive hero, I want to pick a hero. Also, like Vampire is a good one. I'm trying to think. I believe I can't remember some of these, unfortunately, off the top of my head. But so I want to pick heroes that can do undefendable damage into this, right? So even Paladin's a good pick because he can get critical strike to make it undefendable. So if I know that I'm going to get rid of a top defensive hero, I'm going to pick a hyper aggro hero because Iceman and Spider-Man are going to roast a lot of the other meta picks if you can ban their top defensive hero and they don't have another one to choose, right? Loki's adaptable. I would put Doctor Strange is adaptable. Also, Potentially could squeeze him into undefendable. Deadpool, adaptable, but also has a lot of abilities to get to undefendable. Artificer is going to be kind of in that same vein as Black Widow, slow to get up, but once he gets going, he just starts popping off. Wolverine is going to be in hyper aggro. Gambit is going to be in hyper aggro. These ones aren't really played much. Thor would be adaptable. Monk is going to be probably like Monk's really good because he has a really good defense with the chi. He doesn't really have a lot of undefendable, so I wouldn't really slide him in there. He's not hyper aggro, so I would put him in like a top defense, and he also has explosiveness, so he also maybe falls more into an adaptable role. And then the rest, I would probably just slot into leave at home. You could maybe slot Rogue in here somewhere with some undefendable stuff if you get the upgrades. So, I mean, yeah, you could probably put Rogue in here. She has lifesteal. She has ways to get around that as well. So, yeah, so this is, I think this is a good list if you're trying to be competitive on the heroes I would recommend bringing. You know, again, if your cup of tea is, man, I really love Scarlet Witch, then slot her in. But slot her in intelligently is what I'll say, right? So these are ones that I would just kind of put into here. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. And I'm going to kind of walk through the process of the pick three, right? So if we're going off of kind of just strategy in general, I want to have probably one of each of these categories, whether it's adaptable, hyper aggro, undefendable, top defense, or just all S tier, right? So like if you brought this pick three, you'd be fine, right? That's just going to be a good list. If you brought this, and this, that's going to be a good list. Shadow Thief, Iceman, Black Widow, this is a really good pick three, right? But let's, maybe talk a little bit more about not bringing all of the broken champions or the best heroes. So if I know my locals or my players that I'm usually playing against, a lot of people love Shadow Thief, Curse Pirate, and I usually see this a lot, and then like a random other character. What I would probably do is if I know I'm going to see Shadow Thief and Curse Pirate, I'm probably going to ban Shadow Thief, but my picks would be in the undefendable realm. So I would probably pack Ninja and Jean Grey, maybe Paladin. Spider-Man can also potentially be okay there just because he does have the webbed, but, going into those defenses twice is pretty risky. But that's what I would do here, right? So I'd bring undefendable, adaptable heroes. Now, instead of Paladin, or maybe instead of these two, right, I might go Ninja. If I'm looking at like facing a lot of high defense, I'm trying to again max out my undefendable opportunities, right? So yeah, maybe something like this, and an adaptable champion, right? So maybe someone that I know can do some undefendable, but is pretty adaptable, which would likely be Deadpool. This would be a nice pick three that I would be comfortable with. I have undefendable. I have some flexibility and maneuverability around some pretty heavy attacks. I have delayed poison tokens. I have undefendable with both of these. I have undefendable with Deadpool, but I also have just nice adaptable aggro or defensive play with Deadpool, right? So that's kind of like a scenario there, right? So let's see like what I would maybe bring. I really like Spider-Man. I really like Wolverine. And what I would notice here is these are both a lot of attacking, not a lot of defense, and a lot of not defendable. So I would either in this scenario slot in an undefendable champion like Ninja, or slot in like an S tier, like a Shadow Thief, a Cursed Pirate, a Paladin, an Iceman, or a Black Widow, right? That's kind of where I would land. I think this is a really good pick three. This one maybe not so much because, again, we don't have a lot of the undefendable into some of these top defenders. So this might be one where I lean more into a Jean Grey or a Ninja. Now, in that same vein, let's say I pick Spider-Man. I don't go Wolverine. Let's say I go Spider-Man and Deadpool. So now I have a little bit of undefendable, adaptability, burst damage, the flexibility and adaptability here. I have extremely aggro, so if I'm not playing a top defensive hero, I'm going to go Spider-Man like 90% of the time. If they don't ban him and I'm not playing a top defensive hero, Spider-Man's my pick. But now I know, okay, if they're not bringing a top defensive hero and they ban my Spider-Man, I need to understand the flexibility here. I have Deadpool, which can do a lot and is really flexible. He's really adaptable. So now I have a decision. Do I want to have another hypo-aggro character like a Wolverine? So if they do ban Spider-Man, I can still go hard with Wolverine or Iceman, right? Or let's say I just pick a top tier. I throw in Curse Pirate or I throw in Paladin, right? So that's really, if I'm competitively looking at the landscape of the just where, how to go about picking a top three, I'm trying to fill as many gaps as I can when I'm choosing them, right? So if my gap is I have terrible defense, right? So if I do this, and let's say Artificer, these all have really bad defense. Now Spider-Man is okay because he's hyper aggro, so if they hit into me, I can hit them back on my defense. But if they ban Spider-Man, these are really, really bad defenses, and I'm just praying that I get through what I need to do. Especially if they have like a top defensive hero into these, right? That wasn't, honestly, that wasn't a great example. But yeah, so that's kind of when I'm going about picking a top three. I'm trying to find as little gaps as I can in my game without just completely throwing up pick three S tiers, right? Because if you showed up with this, or if you showed up with this, or if you showed up with, like, let's just say this and this, you're going to be fine. The game's not going to be wildly fun. You're going to win a lot, which I guess is fun, but, people are going to roll their eyes every time they play you. So that's really how I go about picking my top three. When it comes to banning, I will always ban S tier. If they only have one S tier hero, like let's say they have like Shadow Thief, Jean Grey, and Gambit, this is a little tough because it's going to depend on my picks as well. So let's say like these are their picks. I'm just going to move these down, and let's say I have Ninja, Iceman, and Monk. So let's say these are their pick threes and these are my pick threes. If they don't ban Ninja, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable going into Shadow Thief, right? If they ban Ninja, I'm banning Shadow Thief, and then I feel a little bit more comfortable going into these matchups with these heroes, right? So that's kind of how like the picking would work, is like, okay, hey, in this matchup, I'm banning Shadow Thief. Just like here. I'm probably banning Curse Pirate. I'm probably banning Black Widow, but that gets a little bit more flexible here, depending on the matchup here, right? If they have Paladin, I have a counter to Paladin, and Paladin's relatively not the easiest to pilot. So if I know they really like hit hard with Gambit or hit hard with Jean Grey, I might ban Gambit and then see what they do. See where they go from here. If I ban Gambit and they ban Ninja, well, these aren't terrible matchups. Iceman into Paladin is not a terrible matchup. Monk into Jean Grey, Monk into Paladin, Iceman into Jean Grey, these are okay matchups. So I'm really just trying to bring the characters where if they ban one, I'm still going to be able to pick from my other heroes to go into any other matchup that could possibly be there. I hope that made sense, but this is really kind of how I look at it when I'm going into bringing three and banning one. I can go a little bit more in detail on maybe some of the ones that I traditionally like to bring, and then I can go from there. So hopefully this all made sense, and we'll go from there.